Hello and welcome to another episode of our Brothers Creed podcast, where we inspire fathers to teach values that become the blueprint for the next generation. We are the Thomas Brothers, and I'm Ethan.
And I'm Jared, and today we're talking about the attribute of harmony. Harmony is an interesting attribute. It's got some different meanings from what I've done some research in some different cultures. So, but something that is critical within our lives and something that we should model for our children and for ourselves. So it's going to be an interesting topic that you might not be too familiar with, or maybe you haven't focused on it too much. And so let's go ahead and dive in.
All right, let's do it.
Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day.
You should be a monster, an absolute monster, and then you should learn how to control it.
No retreat, no surrender.
You can't conceive of what I'm capable of!
There is no tomorrow! There is no tomorrow!
What we do in life, that goes in eternity.
All right. So harmony. What do you say we start off first with our quotes?
Okay.
Would you be down with that?
Yeah, let's do it.
So my quote on harmony is from a little-known guy. He's from India. Let's see, I'm going to leave you some hints. He's an old guy. He was a big protester. Mahatma Gandhi.
I think I've seen him before.
So something he said that I like, he said, happiness is when you think what you say and what you do are in harmony. So it's kind of, I love that in that you are completely aligned, and what you're thinking and what you're saying and what you're doing are completely aligned. Because if they're not, if you say, oh, I'm going to model for my kids patience, or I'm going to be a patient man, and you say that, but you're not, you're going to be misaligned. But if you can say the things that you want to do, and you can do those things or be that, then that alignment will make your life in harmony. So I like that quote. It's cool. It's cool.
Yeah. So I have.
Well, actually, that's kind of begs the question. What if you you're like, I'm impatient. You just like, I'm giving up on being patient. I'm impatient, and then you actually are impatient. Then will you be in harmony?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we should.
That goes back to the definition of harmony.
Maybe we should send Mr. Mahatma a text or something like that.
We'll have to ask him a little bit more.
Yeah. So I had kind of two thoughts around that. So I came up with my own quote for harmony that I kind of, I don't know, as I was researching through, I kind of compiled a couple different things. And then harmony to me, for some reason, I kept going back to like, and I mean, I'm sure we'll get into this, but just like whenever things are in harmony, I think of like music, right? Whenever music is like very harmonious, it just sounds really good. It's very pleasing, and it's very, it just makes you feel better. So you'll know this quote, one that I always loved. And it's a church hymn, right? That there's beauty all around when there's love at home. That one was one that, and we say that to our kids all the time. It's like, just if everyone can get along and harmonize a little bit with each other. Not that things have to be perfect all the time, but it just makes life just so much more beautiful. So the quote that I come up with was creating a harmonious home starts with you. Create a safe space where trust and passion reside.
Trust and passion.
Yeah. A safe space where trust and passion reside. And the biggest part of that, and I'll get into it a little bit too, but on how to develop more harmony, whether it's harmony in your life or in your relationships or at home.
Yeah.
A lot of that is, and we are a podcast focused on fathers. A lot of that is setting a good example.
Yeah.
But we'll get there.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's so many different types of harmony. When I was doing some research on harmony, you think about one of the, if you zoom way out into the universe, you think about the celestial bodies of the Earth and the planets and the sun, and how there's this harmony of all of these things rotating in their orbits and all coming together, that it's almost like this musical symphony. And like you talked about, so there's harmony in music, which is, the combination of simultaneously sounding notes that produce a chord or a chord progression, and it has this pleasing effect. Or you can have like a quartet or these barbershop quartets, right? So
is that going to be your next adventure?
No, probably not. I don't have a voice for singing as well as I do for podcasting.
There you go.
Another one of the interesting ones is this concept of harmony within medicine. So at the basis of classical Greek art, and this is some research I was doing, as well as medical theory, balance was an integral part of that. Disease is considered an imbalance between the environment and the body, and within the body. So it's like, hey, if you're sick, it's because the environment and your body are out of balance somehow. So they cared for that by trying to restore that harmony. So in general, balance, that they wanted to reintroduce this balance that integrates the idea of harmony and symmetry back into your body. And just reading some notes here, there was a Heraclitus in 535 BC, so long time ago. He introduced the definition of harmony as an unification of diversity through the concordance of discordant elements. So,
what does that mean?
It's actually, you have to think about, I'll say it again. So the harmony as a unification of diversity. So it's a unification of diversity through the concordance of discordant elements. So it's discordant elements being different things coming together. So, so the Greek philosophers commenting on his thoughts underline that everything is created of opposites, and all things are subject to internal tension. Tension is the creative force of harmony. So it's actually pretty interesting, and this whole concept that was kind of the start of it, and it really is different in the Chinese, Confucianism, Taoism. Their ideas of harmony are very different from our Western ideas of harmony. So like what you mentioned earlier, harmony in the home, everybody getting along. It's almost an attribute of sameness, right? Everybody's, so it's more about the differences. It supports that the sameness of people are coming together, and therefore they're creating acceptance and within themselves, as opposed to the Western, well, I should say Eastern, Far East, where it's about this natural tension between things.
The bringing together of things that are different that causes harmony.
Yeah, so actually in Confucianism, it has 5 virtues: human excellence, rightness, ritualized propriety, wisdom, and sageliness. And they say that it is not only the practice of these virtues, but the practice of the virtues in harmony that produces the highest virtue. So it's almost like you have these 5 virtues, and then as you practice those in harmony, it creates a fifth. A sixth. It creates a sixth one that's even above that, and that's the heavenly virtue of harmony. And I just find it interesting that you think about the yin and the yang, and how there's these opposing forces, but that actually it keeps each other in balance. And I have An example of that that I can share maybe later on in the podcast about how this natural tension actually helps maintain the harmony in the world around us.
Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. And I guess how I have looked at it and kind of preparing my thoughts is more along the lines of that sameness, right? And it's almost like getting along, and I guess it's kind of creating sameness and like-mindedness, but at the same point having a thought that everyone's different, right? Everyone has different thoughts and opinions and everything else. I think that's what makes, I got to be careful when I say this, but it makes diversity to a certain extent a good thing, right? Having differing opinions is a good thing. Having people from different backgrounds and understandings and everything else, I think that can drive ideas. Mm-hmm. So from a harmonious standpoint, right? Harmony, kind of just from a definition standpoint for me, it is a state of balance or peace and well-being where various different aspects of one's existence kind of mesh together and coexist and is mutually beneficial to the progression of that thing. Whether it's, we talked about music and everybody's different types of voices come together and sound great, or within the home. And I kind of teased at the beginning a little bit with how can a father bring harmony to his life, right, and the life of those around him. Yeah. And I think it starts, number one, with leadership. I think it starts with example. The kids were watching, you guys ever watch Bluey?
Yeah.
So the kids are watching Bluey. It's this cartoon show for kids. And the two little daughters, right, they were getting upset because they were talking to their dad, and they were like, "Dad, you always boss us around. You're so bossy. You always say, don't do this and do that and don't do this and pick up this and pick up that." And he was like, "Well, I'm not being bossy. I'm just I'm teaching you. I'm trying to, I'm trying to help you." And they were like, "No, you're just being bossy." And so he was like, "Okay." So he was like, "Well, how about you point out to me every time you think I'm being bossy?" And then every time he'd be like, "All right, let's go." They'd be like, "You're being bossy." Or if he'd be like, "Get in the car, you're being bossy." Or if he'd be like, "All right, eat your dinner." He'd be like, "You're being bossy." And he was just like, he's like, "What the heck?" And so in order to teach his daughters, so his daughters were going to go to this birthday party. And it was this very important birthday party. And it was somewhere where they had to turn on the GPS to get there. And the dad was driving, and the GPS was like, turn right. And the daughter was like, the GPS is being bossy. And the dad was like, well, how about let's just not listen to it? And so anytime it said turn right, he would turn left. Or if it would say go straight, he would turn right. And he would do it like the exact opposite of what the GPS said to do. And his daughters were like, don't do that. Listen, you need to listen to the GPS. You need to listen to GPS. And well, it's in Australia, so they say the sat nav. You got to listen to the sat nav. And he's like, "No, it's being bossy. It's being bossy. I don't listen to it." And so they were like, "We're gonna be late. We're gonna be late if you don't listen to it." And he was like, "No, it's being bossy." And so finally they stopped and they were like, "Dad, you have to listen to the GPS because it's telling you the things you need to do in order to get to the place that you want to go." And he was like, "Oh, really?" And he was like, "Well, that seems like it would be important to listen to what the GPS is saying." And they were like, "Yes." And so he's like, "Okay, well, let's do what it says. Even though it sounds bossy, let's do what it says." And then they followed it and they got to the place. And then he had like a conversation, and they were like, the daughters kind of like realized like, "Oh, right, you're telling us these things so that you can help us get to where we want to go, right? To teach us." And so a couple of things that I think can drive harmony within a household, and I kind of broke it out between personally in a relationship, mostly with your wife, and then in a home. But just a couple of things you can do to create harmony. Open communication is always important. Respecting each other's spaces, promoting teamwork. If you've ever been on a team, or it's like, the quote where they say, a family that, prays together stays together, or a family that works together stays together, or a family that eats together stays together, right? It's like promoting teamwork and like a sense of team. If you've ever been on like a sports team, we talked about camaraderie before, right? Building that camaraderie will go very far when it comes to harmony. So expressing gratitude is always really good. So personally, if you want to have inner peace, right? I'm not the perfect exemplar of inner peace, but from my research, right, balancing your priorities, I think that is more difficult than it sounds, because I think it's constantly changing. I think what your priorities could be today are different than what your priorities could be tomorrow. So just trying to at least understand your top few priorities that may take place of each other as time goes by. Just balancing those. Physical well-being is something that's huge to promote kind of inner harmony and being happy with all of the things that are coexisting in your life, with work and family and personal hobbies and kids and wife, whatever else. I think, that personal harmony. Financial stability also is another one. It's hard to concentrate on anything else if you feel like you're just barely surviving.
Yeah.
So, yeah, those are just some of the kind of personal ways. And I think that kind of goes, you can apply that, financial one to relationships too, your relationship with your wife, right? If you guys aren't on the same page from a financial standpoint, you don't have to, I'm not saying you have to be filthy rich, but at least on the same page and direction.
Yeah.
Then that can cause, a lack of harmony.
Yeah. It's, I also think that understanding like what the expectation, what are people expecting the harmony? What is the expectation of the people in your household? Setting those expectations, like, is your wife expecting you to, if your wife has the expectation in her mind that to be a harmonious household, you need to come home from work at 3:30 every day and wash, and do all this, and I don't know, mow the lawn and fix the backyard and do all the dishwasher and do all the laundry and clean the house. If that's the expectation for you to do twice a week, it's like, well, is this really putting us in harmony, or is this like an overbalance, or is this just like a one-time thing? So I think that
unless that's your agreement.
Yeah.
I
So
guess.
yeah, the expectation, if whatever you agree on, like that has to be, then it will be in harmony. If you're like, okay, this is how my wife and I work together, or this is how I work together with my kids, and this is the balance that we have. And so, like for example, with my kids, every Sunday morning we spend like an hour and we just clean the house. It's an expectation. They know we got to get ready for the week, and it's like, hey, we spend an hour, and everybody just does their job, and even the littlest one does a little bit of a job, and so it's just like everybody knows it. It's expected, and so it doesn't cause any like issues or major problems, because it's just like, hey, we're gonna get this done in an hour, and like you said, working together. So I think that's important. But like you said, just like the balancing of all the aspects of your life. And sometimes of my life, I've been like heavily, like when I was doing my master's program, I was heavily into studying, and that was all I was doing, and then things were out of balance. Things weren't not quite in harmony because I was doing that difficult task, but that was only for a short time. That was it was an 18-month program, but in the grand scheme of things, it was a short time. But in the moment, it seemed like forever.
I'm sure for your wife, it seemed like a long time.
Yeah, she felt very lonely during that time. But Yeah, because I was working and doing my master's program at the same time. But that harmony between the things that you're working on, between your physical, like are you overdoing it on your physical stuff, or are you underdoing it on your intellectual pursuits, or what about your career? What about the time with the kids? And so striking a healthy balance that is dynamic and that will change over time is important to keeping that harmonic balance in your life, to where you're feeling like you're doing good on all these different fronts, but you're not, and keeping your highest priorities in line. So I like those comments that you had.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think that one comment I had, the little example that I had about harmony. Now remember, I talked about that natural tension between things. So there's something called a trophic cascade. Do you know what that is?
No.
So that is when an animal at the top of the food chain gets either removed or added, and the cascading effects of what can happen as a result. So in this situation, harmony in an environment can be thrown out of whack when an apex predator is taken out of that environment. So as you may have heard, they actually reintroduced wolves into Yellowstone National Park in 1995. And at the time, there was a ton of deer. There was a ton of elk because they didn't have any major predators. Because of that, there was overgrazing. There was more buffalo as well. And it caused a significant change all the way down the food chain. It caused coyotes to be almost one of the alpha predators in the area, which coyotes would feed more on like small vermin and beavers and rodents and things like that, weasels, and that changed things significantly. So what they did is they reintroduced wolves back into Yellowstone, and the effects have been incredible, and rebalancing and bringing harmony back to that ecosystem once again. It's just a couple things so the deer, like I said, were overgrazing, and when the wolves are reintroduced, those deer would no longer graze in certain areas, and they were much more cautious when they were grazing, so they weren't overgrazing. So it was interesting, in some areas, the heights of the trees quintupled over a 6-year period because all the bottoms of the trees weren't getting eaten out.
Really?
Yeah. And they saw some tree species come back alive, like willows, aspens, cottonwoods, that would normally, as like baby trees, they would just get eaten up, right? But as there's no deer or elk to overgraze this stuff, it actually gets to grow.
Or significantly less.
Yeah. The birds were able to move back in. The beavers moved in, and they started creating more dams. The other muskrats, because also you have to think the coyotes are getting suppressed now too. Other muskrats and smaller rodents moved in. As a result of those coyotes, foxes, mice, badgers, all of these things, there were more berries to eat because there was more food kind of at that small level because there's just not deer eating it all up. And it actually changed the course of the rivers. So if you think about it, if you overgraze near a river, right, you're eating all the vegetation. So what's left? Just dirt, right?
Dirt that erodes
now,
away.
The water just erodes that away. So if you scare those deer off by the presence of wolves in the area, or they're more alert when they're eating, or they, don't eat as much, they're not just sitting there all day eating by the shore. Those roots are holding more in place, and what that causes is for the rivers to stay in their courses, for the rivers to get deeper instead of meandering and flooding all the time, and so it actually stabilized the course of the rivers. So there's so many effects that as you kind of go down to that food chain, even all the way down to like lizards and fish, it's just. Yeah, it affects everything all the way down. So there's that natural tension that exists within the gray wolf, and I think that created that little bit of harmony within that ecosystem. So I like to think that in some ways, that natural tension that sometimes exists, even in a family, in a healthy way, between parents and children, can be healthy. You know, they say distance makes the heart grow fonder, right?
Yeah.
So it's sometimes like this, just like this little bit of tension between. That tension has such a negative connotation, but like a little bit of a difference, a pecking order, if you will, within like parents and their kids. You know, it creates a little bit more of a harmony. What kind of, do you think you would live in a harmonious home if your kids basically had equal say as the parents? No, right?
Yeah.
So there needs to be somewhat of an order to things, and that's kind of like how these gray wolves were reintroduced. So it was a really cool case study that's been really cool to study for all these botanists and biologists over the course of many years. So I thought I would share that.
Yeah, that's cool. I'd never kind of heard it from that perspective. That's kind of interesting. I know that there are a lot of like farmers and people that absolutely hate that the wolves were reintroduced for a lot of different reasons.
And I know a lot of them are like, well, there's just not as much elk anymore, and there's not as much deer, and it's like, well, yeah, that's the point.
Yeah. Well, and I think the wolf populations kind of grew more than they expected as well, which is, I mean, it's just everything is, within its own, natural realm. But I don't know, maybe they should just like opened up extended hunting season or something like that. Let people go.
It'd be easy to control. Yeah.
Let people take some elk in the. No, that was Gerard Butler.
No, I was gonna say. I thought you were talking about the wolves.
Oh,
like hunting the wolves.
No.
Liam Neeson in there with some little alcohol bottles from the airplane.
The gray?
Yeah, Into the Gray. Yeah, the Gray.
Yeah, the Gray. That was a good movie. No, I was talking about open up hunting season for in Yellowstone for the elk and deer and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, just to kind of round things up a little bit as well. Within relationships, whenever you are at harmony or at peace, I think it makes certain things easier. I think you talked about expectations. I think it makes getting along with another person a little bit easier, and maybe it makes the expectations are really they're kind of a fickle thing, right? Because expectations just lead to disappointment a lot of times, unless they are like very distinctly shared and communicated. But I mean, harmony in a relationship can be a stress reducer. It can be, it can help to reduce conflict. It can be, increase trust and security at home. It can create a positive environment for children to grow in, which I think is very important. We were talking the other day, and we're talking about how a lot of times, our kids are we get notes from school and so and so is just such a great student. He's perfect all the time. He's a rule follower. He's just really good. And I mean, obviously they do things here and there, but just positive feedback from the kids. But then whenever they get home, they're just like absolute terrors. And you're just like, what the heck is going on? Like you're like being good, quote unquote, when you should be at school. But then when you get home, then you're acting a fool. And I was watching some stuff and kind of doing a little bit of research into that. And a lot of times, children that they act differently at home than they do, like they are well behaved outside of the home, but when they come home, they have really big emotions. It's because they feel very safe at home. It's an environment for them. I mean, kids have emotions, and they're in a stage of life where they're just trying to figure out those emotions and how this is how I feel. This is how I'm going to react, right? When you have a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old, they're just trying to figure all that out. And so if you create an environment at home where they feel safe, then they can explore those emotions. They can learn about them. They can feel them. And then us as parents, right, as fathers, can help to guide them through that and to say, I know you're feeling this, or, this is not how we act in this situation, right? And guide them to be able to self-regulate eventually. I think we're all still trying to work on being able to self-regulate our own emotions. But I think creating that environment is very important for all of us. And I think in the development of your personal creed and the development of what we're trying to do in fostering some of these behaviors in the future generation, it is extremely important.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally agree. I think this is such a great attribute that we can have to teach balance in your life with your kids, modeling that balance. Sometimes it might be okay to say, like, oh, hey, you know what, son or daughter? I always say son because I just have sons. I've had a long day at work, and it's time for me to spend some time with my kids, or I've been doing on this project too long and I need to take a break, or you've been working on this too long and you need to balance your time out with something else. So we encourage all of you to look for opportunities in your lives to do that and to be a force for good for yourself and for your kids. And we invite you to build your creed with us. So let's go ahead and build it together.
All right, let's do it.